All right, can you see my slide? Introduction to planning.
Yes.
Okay, let me get my microphone because using microphone is much better. All right then. Okay, introduction to planning. First thing first. Okay, what do we have here? Project lifecycle. This is just a recap. Perhaps you have heard about this in some of your undergraduate degree program or in some other courses or training. This is almost typical. Okay, let's go in. Construction project. I refer to construction project because because the project management is being offered by civil engineering. So basically, our product is basically construction. When we define a project, later on in this slide, we do have definition of project. Project does not mean basically construction project alone. It can be many things that fit into the category of so-called project. But the example that I'm giving you is basically construction project. Okay, so any project basically do have the same concept anyway. It starts with what we call inception. Start with nothing. Only one client or one developer or one investor thinking that, okay, I have piece of land that I have not been fully capped. What is it? What is this? Okay. All right. So first thing first is the, because if I use annotation, if you use annotation, I cannot basically draw using my pen. Okay, feasibility study. Then once you decide you have some project in mind, then you go for feasibility study. Okay, normally you would engage consultant. There are people, group of people who basically just doing business, doing feasibility study, where you basically come up with a technical and commercial analysis. Then design development. This is where you appoint what we call architecture and engineer firms in order to come up with all kind of design. Then you complete all kind of documentation. For sure, you need to come up with all kind of drawings, specification, bill of quantity. So QS will be part of the team as well. If the project basically do have BQ, then basically you develop BQ. Why? Because you wanted to notify the potential contractor to bid for your project. Then it will go into evaluation process. Then later on, the tender will be awarded to the successful bidder. Okay, that will take a long time. This is what we call procurement period or process or phase. Then after you award a tender, or even when you announce the winner, actually the contract between client and the contractor is basically being formed, even without you signing. That is the concept of basically construction law or any law anyway. Then construction will start somehow, somewhere. When you are being granted access to the site, then basically you can move in. But okay, the construction will begin sometime and then will reach the practical completion, and then you will hand over to the client, and then there is a period, we call it defect liability period. It is like warranty, okay? For construction project, we call it defect liability period, which could run from 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years. It depends on the project. Okay, now there is one big circle there. We call it project management. So the term project management refer to the processes from inception until feasibility, design, tendering, construction, and then defect liability period. That is the scope of project management. So the degree that you are in, basically project management, encompasses with a big scope of work. Okay. Then later on, okay, now we do have another circle. We call it contract management. So as I mentioned, when the project being awarded, then the contract basically just begin. But the construction is, the contractor might not have access to the site yet, okay? But there is a concept called pre-construction and post-construction. You see, when the construction begin, the contractor move in. So this period is, we call it pre-contract and then post-contract. Post-contract meaning to say within the construction management or site management time frame. Okay, so we call it contract management. Construction management, in particular, basically refer to the process happening at the site. Okay, when contractor move in, so those are the things that related to construction management. Construction management is more specific to the construction work, but they do basically overlap between construction management and contract management or even project management, because things are quite repetitive in nature anyway, because contract management, they could be during tendering, during procurement stage, when you want to decide form of contract, etc., and the type of payment. So the contractual matter is there already. But during construction, the most important thing is basically contract administration. Okay, then later on, what else do we have here? When the construction basically completed, hand over to the client, this is what we call a practical completion period. Then this is what we call operation. Operation is where facility management is taking place, whereby maintenance is there. So the building is being operated and it will last for whatever years that you design for building. And the one that I want to show here, is basically the terminology that we use, construction management. So construction management, that's why we do have MKAM program, Master of Engineering in Construction Management. So the student inside those classes will learn more specifically what is going on during the construction process. Okay, but they do learn construction law. You also will learn about construction law. You will also learn about financial management. They also learn about financial management, but in terms of scope, it could be bigger anyway. And then contract management. Contract management is being offered by the School of Built Environment. Normally, QS would take these kind of classes because they want to enhance the knowledge and understanding more about contract. They have learned so much about contract in their bachelor years, but then they wanted to know more. So that is the cost for them. And then facility management. Facility management in UTM also being offered by Faculty of Built Environment under Property Management Division, Department, or whatever. Okay, and normally people who are doing some kind of nowadays we do have high-rise building, condominium, all kind of office building. So people who graduated from facility management, they will be the management for the maintenance or that buildings. Okay, it's a big business, huh? Because we in Malaysia, most of the time we are developing, but then the issue is maintenance is not up to what we expect yet. But in the near future, maintenance will be a big business. Okay, project management, the one that you are in. Maybe you wonder the differences between project management and construction management. In many universities, in that particular school, normally they will offer only one program, either construction management or project management, or sometimes they call it construction project management, and sometimes they call it construction engineering and management. So it depends. It's only one. So project management is a combination of MBA kind of subject plus some construction management related, because your scope of work is very big. And maybe you wonder the profession of project manager. When we mention about project manager, maybe the one that click into your mind is a project manager at the construction site. That project manager, you are correct, is basically working with the contractor. But another project manager is the one that work with the client. In Malaysia, we know this thing as project management consultant. Normally, the one that work with the client are basically consultant, categorized as consultant. Architect and engineer, they are all consultant, okay? So contractor is basically the other party. So project management consultant, so they, in terms of profession, they are being called project manager. But the good thing is that as a civil engineer, okay, as a civil engineer, you can basically fit into many of the what we call phases. You can basically do feasibility study work only. You can do design work as a consultant, and then you can be also involved in procurement or costing, because remember in US they don't have any QS. In the United States they don't have any quantity surveyor profession. They do call cost engineer. So who is this cost engineer? What kind of degree you need in order to become cost engineer? Well, they are basically civil engineer. When they zoom in into project estimating, tendering, and a lot more about costing, at the end of the day, they are associated with a cost engineer, similar to safety engineer. What kind of course? Maybe now we do have perhaps diploma or even master in OSH, occupational safety and health. But previously, we do not have that kind of program, and people call somebody with a safety engineer. Okay, so is there any degree that qualify you to become safety engineer? Well, basically you go for courses, certification, etc., and you have been very passionate about that. And a lot of professional body do have what we call certain association that have the same interest. At the end of the day, you become so-called safety engineer. Similarly, planning engineer. Okay, how do you become planning engineer? You can even become chartered planning engineer. You only learn one topic or one course in your master degree or even undergraduate, but then you zoom in. You zoom in that particular specialized area, but it will require some time in order to become well versed with that specific topic anyway. Okay, so that is basically the concept of project lifecycle. Before we go into the next slide, lifecycle costing. Okay, project costing. Project costing, basically whatever things start from inception until defect liability period do have costs associated. Client will have to pay for feasibility study consultant, for architect and engineer, and for even the bigger portion will go into construction. So that will be a project costing. Then how about construction costing? Construction costing is basically for during construction works. Okay, but sometimes people just simply use the terminology, they mix around the terminology, but we if we understand the concept, that should be okay. When you see, let's say the now we are building the second tallest tower in the world, isn't it? The Menara Warisan or whatnot. Okay, people would basically ask, what about the cost? People say 5 billion. Okay, I don't know. Construction might be around few billion, and the rest would go into different, or even 5 billion would basically belong to the construction only. We never know. Okay, nobody tell us. And then, if for instance, throughout the entire life cycle of the project, meaning to say from the inception until we demolish the building that we built, okay, we develop and build later on, maybe 100 years from now, if you can calculate the cost, that will be called life cycle costing. So nowadays, even in JKR, I'm not sure, but this concept is not new. It has been developed long time ago, and people can even do PhD with regard to life cycle costing. You are not going to be able to come up with all the entire cost. You might zoom into a specific area only. Let's say feasibility study. That could be your PhD. Some people develop life cycle costing for demolition work during demolition only. Okay, if for instance you would be able to estimate the life cycle costing of a building that will run for 100 years, then basically it will give you indicator. It's for you to make a better decision. Let's say client do have a few alternatives, A, B, C, D. A could be a commercial development, B could be office building, C could be a residential building, and D could be mall, whatever things, okay, on that piece of land. The issue is that how do we decide? There could be many mechanisms. One of the way could be we could use basically life cycle costing. At the end of the day, perhaps if we develop project A, it will cost us just simply 100 ringgit per day. Let's simply say that. This one is 110. This could be 120. This could be 95 per day. We end up to be like that, for instance. That could be, if we do have a complete set of analysis there, then we can make a better decision. We go for D, for instance, because over a long period of time, we basically can save more. Okay, we can save more. That is concept of project life cycle. All right. Okay, now we go into a bit into our topic. Okay, PMI. I'm not really sure whether you are a member of PMI, Project Management Institute. As I mentioned, in this world, there are a lot of professional body. IEM, for instance, one of the professional body for engineer. And then we do have a safety and health officer for safety. Planning also do have professional body. And then how about project management? Do we have professional body? Yes, we do have. Example, PMI. In UK, they do have different organization, but whatever body that they are, the purpose is always the same. They try to basically get everybody in such a grouping in order to develop, disseminate knowledge, come up with the so-called body of knowledge, and come up with the professional ethic, so that this profession can deliver in a better ways. That is always the concept. Okay. If, for instance, you want to become IR, to be called IR, so perhaps you will go to IEM. We do have BAM later on that you can get IR. Okay. Initially it was IEM. Then later on, once you fulfill all kind of submission regulation, whatever thing that need to be submitted, then you will get your IR. But how about project management? People in the project management kind of business, they don't really need IR, because IR normally related to design things. But if you are project management field, having project management professional, some kind of certification or acknowledgement, that is much more things that people look upon compared to having IR. If, for instance, in your resume, you do have your professional membership with PMI, that's it. People won't ask many questions. Okay, so now we just simply use PMI as a reference point. You can use any other professional. In PMI, Project Management Institute, they basically mention project management process fall into 5 groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and control, and closing. So the topic that we are in is basically planning. This is what we want to zoom in. Um, Later on, you will learn about project management. There is I think one class. So you will learn the whole knowledge area in PMI, I believe. But our concern is basically planning. If you look at this model, initiating, planning, executing, as if after you plan, then you execute, then you basically monitor. It looks like as if the diagram looks like that. But in reality, this is initiating. Initiating basically require a lot of new things to establish, to set up the project. Planning. Okay, this is what we are going to zoom in. When you plan, then basically you execute. Okay, this is happening in the real situation. Planning might be done before we even start a project, because nobody plan thing which already running. We plan thing which it might not exist yet. That is what planning is all about. Okay, then you execute. During execution, then you conduct monitoring. Monitoring, it is like a checking to see to what extent the things that you plan is running according to what your KPI or target. Okay, so monitoring is a process of getting all the information. Once you get the information, then only you can take action. You take action while you still have time. So if you use this drawing what we call superficially, then you might think that plan, execute, and then monitor. So if you do that, it is too late to do anything. While we still have time, then basically we make correction. But then we need to basically revise the plan. Okay, there is nothing wrong with plan revision, because that is the concept. You never know. Let's say you have 2 years of the project, anything can happen. So why wait until the end of the period, then only you just simply report you are running late? No, you don't do that. You have to report along with your basically current progress so that you can catch up. Then only at the end of the day, you still finish in 2 years with a lot of revision, with a lot of hard work, night shift or whatever shift. It doesn't matter as long as you reach the your ultimate aims. Okay, that is what the project management process is all about. Okay, now we go into project management knowledge area. So I do not want to touch the detail because I just want to show you in project management or PMI BOK, body of knowledge, in whatever discipline that you learn, there must be body of knowledge. So from that body of knowledge, then we develop the curriculum and syllabus of your degree actually. Even in civil engineering, there is a body of knowledge that we refer to. Some of the reference, quite comprehensive reference, we can refer to American Society of Civil Engineering. They do come up with the comprehensive body of knowledge. So that's why maybe you ever wonder why in university you need to learn this subject, that subject, etc., because it is mentioned in the body of knowledge. Okay. So similarly, in project management, it's like that. And in that particular 10 area here, time is being mentioned in knowledge area number 3. Previously, the word time was being used, but subsequently now they basically change into schedule. So when you see the word schedule, so basically you understand it's the same thing anyway. But the concept of time is quite abstract. It's much bigger thing. So people say, how are you going to schedule the time? Basically, you are scheduling the event in terms of the timing. So that's why schedule might be a proper terminology, okay, being used. That's why they do change. But anyway, as long as you understand schedule and time is the same thing, okay, that should be fine. Okay, now let's take a look at all these elements. There are 10 area there, 10 area from 1 until here. And you notice planning is being mentioned in all those areas. What does that thing mean? Meaning to say, everything basically need planning. we in a project, for instance, we do have communication. Communication is one of the big issue, and even communication do have planning by itself. How about scope? Scope also do have planning. Cost, cost also do have planning. Resource for sure. Resource basically related to the scheduling anyway. Risk also do have planning. Okay, procurement, ICT also do have planning, and time is the one that we are going to zoom in. Okay, quality also do have planning. Project integration also do have planning. So planning is basically embedded in many of the sub knowledge area or sub discipline. Everything basically need planning. So that's why in project management, if you read in some of the publication, it mentioned planning. Planning is the heart of project management. Is the heart. What does heart mean? Heart ni maksudnya jantung lah, bukannya hati. Kalau kita bahasa Melayu ni, itu jadi masalah. When we translate jantung, dia jadi heart. Heart ni kalau istilah in English, it could be liver. Liver tu boleh makan. Jadi the heart. In human body, the most important organ is basically the heart. When the heart stop, that's it, man. You basically stop functioning. That is the function of the heart. And similarly, in project management, the planning is the heart of everything. Everything basically starts with planning. And the solution could be due to planning. Some of the many issues happening in project management is basically could be coming or could be solved by using planning. Okay, now we go back. This is just all that I mentioned here is perhaps revision to you. A project. Now, what is project? What is project? Project can be defined as temporary endeavor. Temporary endeavor meaning to say it does have a beginning and ending, starting and ending period. So basically definite timing. So something which is indefinite cannot be considered as a project. Okay, I will give you an example. Then normally a project is other than temporary endeavor, starting and beginning, it basically normally do have a theme, complex activity, and then what else? And then objective, okay? Objective, a scope, resource are related there, objective, the purpose. And normally a project is basically unique. We're unique in such a way we cannot basically duplicate two projects exactly. Example, okay, let's say we want to build KLCC. KLCC is there in Kuala Lumpur. Now we want to bring KLCC to Johor Bahru. Okay, let's say we basically design the same thing in terms of shape, in terms of height, in terms of everything looks the same. But when you construct things in different location, you can expect challenges during construction might not be the same. In KLCC last time, they do have all kind of challenges because of the limestone area in that particular Selangor Turf Club. Itu ladang lumba kuda at that time. And then the JB might be different. That would be the foundation is different. But then how about manpower being used? We cannot bring the old people. We cannot basically bring the old team. Okay, we bring back the old team who construct KLCC way back in 1986 because they already have experience. By this time, they perhaps some of them already die already. Okay, we cannot use the same machine. The machine now are different. So everything will be different. That is the concept of uniqueness. So meaning to say, when you are as a project manager trying to basically run a new project, for instance, you cannot basically be overconfident. Maybe you are saying, okay, this project, I have run this 20 project, similar project before. So there is no problem. Well, you never know. You can expect a problem because no such project are unique. No two project is basically unique. That is the characteristic of project. Okay, project normally do have team. You cannot do project alone. And we do not call it project when it is too simple. When lecturer give you project in classes, even you in during your undergraduate, then you have impression, wow, project is coming. Meaning to say it's a big things. Otherwise, people will basically give you assignment, homework. Normally project do require teamwork. There are some complexity and there are time frame that you need to submit, completed, and there are purposes. Okay, what is the purpose of we coming up with a project? Okay, in order to fulfill something. I give you an example. Let's say eating. Maybe some of you already have your breakfast because this is your first class. You say, oh, you are going to die today from 9 until 5. Well, it looks like almost impossible things to do. Don't worry, don't worry. You are going to be, you never know. The semester is going to end very fast without you realizing. And by next semester, you are going to be very familiar with the ecosystem of this weekend class. It is tiring, I tell you, but nobody ever die because of coming into master degree program. They all basically graduated with much higher CGPA compared to your undergraduate. Okay, let's say eating. So early in the morning, I just have my coffee, no heavy breakfast yet. Okay, maybe later on, lunch I will eat. And then later on again, during class, I will drink a cup of tea and then get dinner and then supper and then what? So basically eating is never ending. So can eating be considered as a project? It cannot because it is indefinite. It is a routine. But what happened? What happened when you basically buat kenduri? Now we are in phase 4. So every kenduri, whatever, with SOP, you can do. Kahwin also can. Kenduri also can. So let's say you buat kenduri. When you buat kenduri, for sure, the mentality of the people, makan is there lah. Okay, what happened when during kenduri event, whatever event, so makan, there is a timing for makan. People invited you from 12 until a certain time. So what happens if you come late? Okay, there might not be food already because the caterer would pack and give to all the workers, everything to bring back. Okay, that would be the situation. There is a limited time. And then normally Kenduri is a big event. It involves a lot of activities. If we go for Datin Kenduri, they wanted to be to conduct to be known as wedding of the year, artis for instance. And then they would engage so-called wedding planner. And you know what? In Microsoft project, there is a common template called wedding planner as an example. Meaning to say, even the event of wedding, you can use Microsoft project, but not for the simple wedding. Everybody will laugh at you. But this, we are talking about maybe a big event, wedding of the year that costs maybe 10 million or so. So that wedding planner will charge you, I charge you maybe 500,000 as a fees because I use the Microsoft project and Primavera and all kind of software with all kind of fancy things. And the Datin also will agree, okay, then, all right, okay. You see that example. Why? Because Kenduri qualify as a project because it has all the characteristics. Okay, all right, that is the example. Then we go for project management. What is project management? By definition, project management is the application of knowledge, skill, tools, and technique to project activities. So whatever thing that you call it project, And naturally, in construction industry, our project is basically construction project. Whereas in other discipline, perhaps some of you may be coming from not from civil engineering. For instance, in a school of what we call computer, their project could be developing a software. In a book publication, the project could be publishing a books. So you can call it a project. But in even yesterday, we have what we call the budget, one of the bloated budget of the century. Okay, so people basically coming up with the to table the budget. So the big project in the Ministry of Finance there is to come up with the basically budget for next year, which basically we have heard yesterday. But before that, they have been working on another project. We call it Rancangan Malaysia ke-12. So that is the project for them for that particular field. Okay. So now let's take into example project requirement. Once you combine the knowledge, skill, tool, and technique, which basically combine all kind of project activity to meet project requirement. Okay, now let's give example. Let's give example in terms of okay, project management. Project management consists of knowledge plus skill plus a tool plus what we call technique. Okay, first thing first, knowledge. Let's say, okay, let's say after you graduate, okay, after you graduate, you get a job, for instance, in developer or contractor, whatever. Of course, you basically send your resume mentioning that you have a master in project management. You are well versed with Microsoft project because you have learned in this class, for instance, just one class anyway. You have learned project scheduling, planning scheduling, and then your boss was very impressed with your resume and all the grade. Okay, now your boss assigned you with one responsibility. We do have a 10-story building coming up. Why don't you in charge of developing what we call the CPM diagram of that project? Okay, now what is your reaction? Okay, you just basically learn thing, not much. Now you are being asked to handle 10-story high apartment building, for instance. Well, I think by the night time you are going to start updating your resume again. Well, where can I go after this? Okay, let's see. So in order to do that, you need knowledge about planning, scheduling, to be specific. So this is what our class is all about. You are going to learn some of the knowledge. Okay, you need to understand the concept of planning, scheduling, technique, and then from that you develop into network diagram, calculation, etc., etc. So everything that we are going to learn in this class, that can be considered of knowledge, where you can find from going for courses or school, or even you can read books, etc. Okay, then skill. Skill is something very unique, hands-on. You might not, if for instance you read thousands of books per day, you are not going to be very skillful unless you go and really work. Then all the skill will be coming into you. Example, how about construction method? Example of construction method. In order to do scheduling, you basically need to know construction method. And for fresh graduate, these are the things that they do not know construction method because they have not been in a real job situation except for 3 months of practical training, which is not much. Okay, once you go into project after project after project, then only you understand what kind of construction method that you can use in order to construct something. And among the construction method also, they could be the one that basically at minimum cost. We always concerned about cost, okay? And in construction method is basically the work sequence. This is another issue. This is what we call WBS. We need to develop WBS in order to know the interconnection between one activity and another in terms of logic relationship. And again, those kind of things might not be available in the textbooks. You see, very
What is
specific.
WBS?
Work breakdown structure. Work breakdown structure. We do have another, maybe by tomorrow you are going to learn about this. Okay. And then productivity. Okay, productivity rate. Okay, productivity rate means just how fast can you do things. Let's say you want to erect from work, you want to install rebar, you want to do concreting, you want to do piling, you want to do excavation with different machine tools, different manpower or team, etc., etc. You need to estimate that. Why? From this productivity rate, it will basically generate what we call duration for each of the activities. And you know what? For each of the activity that we calculate, you have seen in any project scheduling, there is a basis to calculate those activities. It's not just simply people just simply put, okay, piling, you just put 10 days. Okay, excavation, you put 2 days. No, there are basis for that. And it is coming from productivity rate. And again, productivity rate is not being put in books. In a country like US, they do have a textbook or even manual that they develop. But I have not seen anything being developed in Malaysia yet in terms of productivity rate. There are people who basically go through PhD, master, who maybe did something about productivity rate, but they are being confined to the study or case study only. It is not going to be very comprehensive. So that basically rely very much on skill or experience, okay? And many, many more. And then tools, example of the two software tools, we can use Microsoft Project. And then perhaps Primavera. These could be the two software that commonly being used. We are going to learn about Microsoft Project, but not the Primavera, because Primavera, the issue with the software is very difficult to get. Okay. And even you can get the pirate copy also sometimes might not be easily installed. That is issue. But Microsoft Project should be good enough as a starter. Okay, let's say Microsoft Project. Later on, you need to get Microsoft Project installed in your computer in order to help you basically in the assignment or even in a Microsoft Project later on. You can get the Microsoft Project. You can purchase from Lazada or Shopee. Some of the people are selling those things, but it's okay. It works well. We are going to use only perhaps at the end of the semester. It should be okay for educational purposes. Okay, let's say you purchase one, then you install, then you start to open your Microsoft Project software. You will see the interface. Well, the computer will look at you and you are going to look at the screen of the computer and you start asking how to start. What are the things that I should click first? You see, even software, so you need to learn, okay? You need to have knowledge. So that's why people have been conducting all kind of classes for Microsoft Project. You can Google. In order to understand Microsoft Project, sometimes people give you courses for 3 days. But that will not be sufficient. You need to go for how to manage a project using Microsoft Project. That is kind of courses that you can go. That will take another 3 days. If you go for advanced or more complete one, another 2 more days. And nowadays, people charge perhaps from 800 to even 1,000 per day per course. Just imagine 3 days would be costing you easily 3,000. Okay, but you never know the outcome. Some are good ones, some are very poorly conducted. Perhaps you can start, you can go to CIDB, okay, for this kind of courses. Perhaps that could be a good starting point. But the best thing is that if you can get people who are really well versed about Microsoft project, especially they are project manager who had been running real project, that should be a better place for you to learn if you want to zoom your career into planning. Okay, all right. Then even Microsoft Project and Primavera use technique. Last one, PDM diagram. Both Primavera and Microsoft Project use PDM. We do have Gantt chart. We do have arrow diagram. And then AON diagram, activity on node diagram. And then PDM, precedent diagramming method, is the one that being used a lot in many of the software currently. So you see, different technique will basically reflect different graphic representation, but the results are all the same. It is like you want to go from one place to another. You can take a bus, you can take car, motorcycle, different mode of transportation, but they are the outcome are the same. You will arrive at the destination as well. Okay. So you see, when you combine those things together, that is what we call project management. With the project requirement, what are the project requirements? We mentioned here, project requirement. Okay, before we go into a specific project requirement, let's take a look at this diagram. In the middle here, this is what we call triple constraint. Maybe you have heard about this, what we call triple constraint. In many textbooks, it will mention triple constraint. This is like the objective of managing a project or construction, whatever things related to project management. We wanted the project to basically complete according to time, cost, without sacrificing the quality. That is what we call triple constraint. They are all interrelated. But in Project Management Institute, they draw the objective something like this. They do have scope, which I agree. Schedule is basically time, cost, and then the tension is that all basically related to the quality. But for me, I would like to have a more comprehensive. Everything is there. I normally draw something like this: scope, and then time, cost, quality is there, safety and health, and then environment. This is more comprehensive. Perhaps you have heard about ISO for 9001 is for quality. ISO 14001 is for safety and health, just being introduced way back 2018. And then ISO 14001, that is for environment. So those integrated management system, if you do not have this kind of drawing, so where basically those things is going to fit into your project environment. Okay, so that's why I basically would like to have this kind of diagram and put inside here as a so-called project requirement. Okay, then that will be the objective of project. At the end of the day, people expect you to complete the project according to scope. And in fact, if you look at your tender document or contract document, on the first few pages there, it basically it is well-defined scope of work. That is what the client asks you to do, no more, no less, and that is what you are going to be paid for. And in order to fulfill this objective, you need 5M. M number one would be machinery, not in the following order: machinery, material, man, money, and then method. Also M. Sometimes people, instead of saying method, people simply use the word know-how. Know-how meaning to say is basically you know how to do things. Is the construction technology things, is related to knowledge, skill, experience, will be grouped under method, because we wanted to have the 5M for you to easily remember things. So that's why we put method. Okay, let's take example.
Sorry, sir. Your diagram, right? The one that has scope, cost, and time. Between
All right.
scope and time, you define as quality, right? Between scope and cost, what did you wrote there? Sorry.
Scope and cost, safety and health. Sorry, safety and
Safety and
health.
health. Between cost and time?
OSH, better. Cost and time is E. E basically environment.
Okay.
Okay, environment.
Thank you, sir.
All right then. Okay, let's take a look at this building. Everybody know this building in Malaysia, KLCC. Okay, the tallest twin tower. We can still be proud of, even though it was used to be the tallest building in the world, but then it was dethroned by the Taiwan 101 and then Burj Khalifa, but still the tallest twin tower in the world. We can be proud of. Okay, so the first tower and second tower being built by Korea, and then Japan. Korea and Japan. Okay, so when people basically decide who is going to be the winner, they do have what kind of criteria, multiple criteria, and it is the responsibility of these people to basically have 5Ms. That is what they need to bring in. Okay, so why we basically give the project to Japan and Korea? Are they going to use all their manpower? Yeah, they do have Korean and Japan expatriate, but most of the workers are coming from Bangladesh, Indonesia, Vietnam, etc., not even from Japan and Korea anyway. Material, they are not going to import all the material from Japan and Korea. They can use all local material. Machinery, yeah, they do have some of their own brand machinery, but you can use any machinery available anyway. Money, they are not going to use all the Japanese yen and Korean won. It just money is money. You can use whatever denomination. Okay, so what distinguish between these two companies, for instance, instead of giving the project to them, why don't we give the project to Malaysian company so that the money will not be flowing into other country, for instance? That could be the idea. But can you imagine if we give the project to Malaysian company, which basically do not have any experience building the tallest building in the world, we could end up with the Teluk Intan Menara, which basically Senget sebelah, or Pisa in Italy, the Leaning Tower. That could be the situation, or the project never basically completed, because in Malaysia we know the project delay happening 99.99%. That it could be the turning point or the decision, the strong decision to decide which basically company to be given the project because of know-how. See, that is the resources. Then, okay, now we come to the end of this diagram process. Project management process is being defined. The simple term that I mentioned before is basically these 5 things, but the complete not project management define process as this thing. But in many other books, for instance, project management process can be defined by this mechanism: planning, organizing, leading, directing, staffing, communicating, coordinating, promoting, and lastly, monitoring and control. And remember, planning, the word planning is there. Okay, so our focus of the study is basically, we are going to zoom into this planning only. And you, as in a project management program, later on, you will learn organizing as one of the topic. And perhaps in one of your, not topic, the subject, one of the subject, you do learn about quality itself as one particular subject, you see. Each of the thing is very big in terms of the knowledge itself. Organization, for instance, do have many thick books by itself. Okay, So in short, this diagram tells us in the middle there is basically the objective of project management. And in order to achieve those objectives, you require resources, right amount or number of resources. And how are you going to utilize these resources? You are going to utilize it through the mechanism of planning, organizing, leading, etc., etc. Then basically you complete what we call project management is all about. And before we go into break, sorry, we're running out of time by right. We should take a break. Just one last slide. This is an example of project requirement. Remember project requirement. Again, time is there. And then environmental, the one that you asked me before, quality is there. Cost, safety and health. And another thing which is basically missing from my previous slide is basically contractual obligation. So when you can complete a project within the time frame, meeting all kind of environmental things, you do not want to destroy the environment, flash flood, and all kind of dusty environment, noisy environment, and then quality is there, project cost is there, and you do not want to, while building the tallest tower in Malaysia right now, Menara Warisan, 100 people have to die. Oh, so what is the purpose? You could be proud of building the tallest tower in Malaysia, but then a lot of people had to die. So you see, so project requirement basically have to take into consideration many things. So that in such a way, making managing project is not going to be easy. And lastly, contractual obligation. Contractual obligation meaning to say there are clauses, term, and condition between both parties that have to be fulfilled. So client might not be happy if you complete all these things, but then there are certain things that you basically do not fulfill, or vice versa. You also as a contractor, you can complete within the time frame, but then in terms of payment, very late payment, there are things which basically not being paid accordingly. There are things like variation order not being paid, etc. You might not be happy. So project requirement basically fulfilling everything here, then only everybody will go back happy. Okay. All right. So that's it for some part of the slide. We do have a lot more things. And why don't we take a break? Okay, we take a break, about 10-minute break, please. Okay, then we come back and continue with the rest of the slide. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Cik, I have a question. Hello?
Okay, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Attendance?
Not yet.
Yeah, okay.
Attendance is going to be shared at the end, normally at the end of the class.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I got one question before we take a break.
Yeah, sure.
The earlier slide you were mentioning about project management are being split into project management consultant and also contractor. Ideally, do we have a project manager who work with both?
Okay. In from the statistic that I have read, project management books by Andrew Tan, long time ago, he basically do have, he gave basically statistic. Project management consultant, from whatever statistic at that time, normally being civil engineer, normally around 60% of the project management consultant would be coming from civil engineer. Then maybe around 30% would be coming from QS, and then 10% would be coming from architect. But if we are talking about project manager working with the contractor, I would definitely say most of the time will be coming from civil engineer. Architect cannot become project manager. Architect can become resident engineer. They can become, in government, we do have superintendent officer. It could be coming from architect. It could be coming from so-called, another person is what? A QS, okay? But most of the time, project manager, civil engineer would be working with the contractor, and at the end of the day, they will call project manager. But in terms of project management consultant, they could be people from architect background, they could be people who basically coming from QS, they could be people easily fit, basically civil engineer. All right. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Hi, sir. How long is the break?
About 10 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. All right. Now we shall continue with the rest of the slide. Okay, now in project management objective, okay, if you basically refer to other publication, they mention project management objective would be to basically save time and cost. That would be very normal. And then to basically increase productivity, and then also they mention to maximize the profit. Okay, to maximize the profit. So how do you maximize the profit? Now let's go back to the fundamental of, for instance, tender. Okay, let me write it here. Value, tender value equivalent to total construction cost plus profit. When contractor submitted tender value, basically normally it comprises of all the total construction costs. Total construction cost can be divided into direct costs plus indirect costs. Direct costs normally related to man, machine, material. That is a big portion. Maybe around 90% of the construction cost will be coming from these three main items there. And then indirect costs. Indirect costs would be the cost of the management cost, the overhead costs, where you need to set up a site office. You need to basically do safety and health as well. Project monitoring is there. All kind of utility bill, everything is there. This is what we call indirect cost. Might be around 10%. So that's what total construction cost mean. On top of that, then the rest will be your profit. Let's say tender value could be 10 million. the total construction cost could be 9, whereas your profit is 1 million. So if it is 1 million, so you are making about 10%. So that is quite reasonable. Okay, quite reasonable. So the issue is that how do you maximize profit? Meaning, if you want to maximize a profit, you jack up the profit. The only equation is that you need to reduce costs because the tender value is there. It's almost fixed. Okay, it's almost fixed in open tender where there are bill of quantities. So the amount is almost there. So how do you maximize profit without reducing the cost? That could be almost impossible. So if you want to maximize your profit, you have to basically look at what are the things inside that contribute to the total cost. You focus on man, machine, and material. That will be a big portion. So that's why material, for instance, you eliminate waste. How do you eliminate waste? By proper planning. Again, planning is part of the things. And then you come up with all kind of way or system, and that is especially during site management. And perhaps if you want to go into a bigger things, nowadays people go into sustainability or green kind of things where you might be able to use the concept of 3R. Okay, so you reduce waste and then reduce error, rework. This has something to do with the quality of work. You do not want your work to be rejected. If your work is rejected, then you have to redo. When you redo, you basically increase your cost. Client is not going to pay you extra because it is your fault. Reduce uncertainty in time and basically cost. Again, you use the concept of planning and scheduling. Example, you do not want to bring your equipment too early or too late. You do not want to bring even the material too early or too late, because too early, for instance, you have difficulty in storing, or some of the material might be damaged due to weather condition or might be stolen. Okay. You do not want to bring a lot of people to the construction site, for instance, and most of the time they are doing nothing. Why? Because you do not allocate work for them. So a lot of things have to do with the planning. So that's why we utilize planning a lot in order to help us basically reduce the cost. At the end of the day, we can maximize our profit. Okay, that is example. Avoiding unnecessary penalty is this is what we call in construction. We do have what we call LAD, liquidated ascertain damages. It is like penalty where you encroach into the practical completion period. You do not want to reach into that situation where you are going to be impose certain penalty on daily basis. Make sure that you are being granted what we call extension of time if there are such delay. But again, not all delay will be granted extension of time. Delay being caused by the client or client representative or the third party only. Okay, you as a contractor, you have to be very careful. All right, so maximizing profit, meaning to say, yeah, it is any organization basically when they embark into this kind of business, becoming contractor and whatnot, they want to make as much money as possible, but not making money by cutting corners, by cheating, by doing all kind of unethical or corrupt practice. By right, you should focus on managing your resources well. At the end of the day, you can reduce the cost, and then perhaps you can get your targeted profit or even maximize your profit. If you are able to get your target profit, that will be good enough. Why not go into things further and try to maximize a little bit by properly managing your project. Okay, now we come into
So can you repeat what is LED again? Liquidated?
ascertain damage. liquidated, SACERT, certain damages. So in a construction contract, okay, the term penalty can be defined in many things, but for simple terminology, we use penalty. In a construction contract, the penalty has been decided early. Okay, there could be penalty which not been decided. So that is what we call liquidated at certain damages. LAD at certain rate. They do have things that they basically based on how to calculate those rate. Okay. All right then. Now we go into our planning scheduling. So planning
Sorry,
scheduling, yeah.
sorry, one more question. The penalties that you were mentioning, if it's decided early, that means it is stated in the contract, right?
Yeah, you are right.
What is the example if penalties not available in the contract?
Normally, normally in a modern construction contract, most of the penalty are being predetermined. The rate, whatever it is, once you go beyond the practical completion, for sure you are already encroached, you are going to be subject to penalty because the client are not going to be happy. But the issue is that the amount of compensation or penalty being imposed. So in most of the modern construction, the penalty is being predetermined at certain rate so that everybody know when you encroach into contractor period, you are going to be fined with that kind of rate. Okay, it's like our compound SOP COVID ke apa ke ataupun traffic punya tu ke, kan semua dah ada dia punya itu. Itu example of predetermined rate. Mungkin yang lain-lain tu yang dipanggil damages lah. The client can mungkin kadang-kadang rate tu tak reasonable. Okay, the impact might be bigger than the predetermined rate. Tapi itu pun subject to argument lah later on lah. Itu yang akan timbulnya issue, basically dispute if it is not being determined. But nowadays in whatever contract that we have, for instance, in the construction industry, could be JKR, or what we call IEM, CIDB, or PAM, mostly is a LAD, liquidated ascertain damage. Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Planning and scheduling. So planning and scheduling provide a project plan schedule that is essential in project time management. Okay. When we are talking about time management is a big topic by itself. What could be the scope inside time management? Consists of planning, then scheduling, tracking, and control. So tracking is a terminology widely used in the planning and scheduling things, whereas in project management in general, we can use the word monitoring. In software like Microsoft Project or even Primavera, for monitoring, they call it tracking. Okay, so don't get confused when you hear about the word tracking. So it simply basically refer to monitoring and control. So the three things: planning, scheduling, tracking, and control. So that what the time management is all about. Okay, so that's why I mentioned time management is a big thing inside the time management. To be more specific, we do have what we call planning, scheduling, tracking, and control. Okay, let's take example. In site management, in construction management program, there is one topic we call it site management. What is site management? Site management is the management of the construction site where all the activity is going on. That is the real things. And you see, we do have time, again, cost, quality, environment, health and safety. And inside the time management, or we simply call it I mentioned before, the time consists of the three items there, including the planning, including the scheduling, and then including the what we call progress. Progress is monitoring or tracking and controlling. And the quality a lot more tools that we can use in order to monitor or basically to manage quality at the construction site. Later on, you will learn in one of the subject. Okay. All right. Planning and scheduling is needed for what? Tracking and control. There is no way that you can track and control a project time and cost, especially if, for instance, you do not develop project scheduling yet. There is no project scheduling, or basically, maybe you can refer to CPM, critical path method diagram, that normally being used in many of the project nowadays. There is no way that you can come up with a tracking and controlling mechanism without having developing the planning and scheduling first. Okay. And then number 2 is claim analysis, quantification and defense. It is often a practice in the construction industry, for instance. You need to basically do things, you need to execute things first, then only you can claim. Okay. You need to submit what we call progress claim on monthly basis, or whatever the interval agreed upon, but normally it could be monthly basis. And inside the progress claim, they could be evidence that you provide in order for the consultant that represent the client, or even the client themselves, agree with your claims. So you just simply cannot say, okay, I have completed 10% of the work. Well, that 10% consists of what? You need to provide evidence. You need to provide progress photo, for instance. You need to provide updated your bar chart, for instance, updated network diagram, so that people can see in a graphic form. Of course, client representative will basically go to the construction site to check, but basically sometimes even after checking also they might not remember everything, so it is better to have everything on a piece of paper or whatever poster, just to show evidence. So you need planning and scheduling. Planning and scheduling as one of the tools. Effective utilization of resources, labor, material, and equipment. Okay, now in the next slide later on, we are going to show, I'm going to show you example of when we do have scheduling, and then later on how basically we know how many number of people is going to be used at that particular time, what number of machineries, etc., etc. So that's what we call resource utilization. And from that resource utilization, later on, we are going to develop what we call resource leveling and resource smoothing. Leveling and smoothing. So this thing we are going to learn in the second class, not tomorrow, okay? Because we need to finish up everything about planning scheduling first. Then the next class would be talking all about resource utilization, okay? So inside resource utilization, then you are going to be introduced the concept of resource leveling, resource smoothing, and even resource conflict. When we input resources into our activity, then we are going to see whether resources conflict or not. Example, let's say you only have one crane, one tower crane, and that one tower crane is there. Then later on, you basically put list of activity, and all those activity require tower crane, the same tower crane. But at the end of the day, you will notice that the resource will be conflicting, meaning to say, one tower crane have to work in maybe 3 different areas, which might be very difficult in terms of logistic, okay? Not to mention about mobile crane. Mobile crane have to move around, and it will take a lot of time in order to set up the crane at that particular spot. So if that kind of things happen, then what could be your solution? Okay, the only thing you would be able to see once you come up with the scheduling. Okay, for proper utilization of resources. Okay, planning allows us to develop framework, project execution, monitoring, and control. We already mentioned that. And there is one very famous saying: failing to plan is like digging your own grave or planning to fail. Okay, so that's why everything basically starts with planning. Planning is the thinking ahead. So by that time, it will give us ample time to basically react. So it is not too late. So that is the purpose of basically planning. Why people fail in planning? Lack of commitment in planning. For instance, people thought that planning is just simply the requirement of the contract. During the tender, you normally need to submit your CPM diagram because it is a tender requirement. If it is not there, then your tender could be rejected because you do not fulfill the what we call a checklist. Then, once you are being awarded the project, within 2 weeks, for instance, you need to develop to again submit detailed CPM diagram to the client. So again, this is much more critical because you already won a tender and you are going to use this thing as the what we call baseline for you to execute project, and from that on, your progress will be monitored by the client. Okay, but people aware of the project requirement during tender and even during project, but then they do not put a lot of effort. They do not want to learn. They do not want to, even in Malaysia, for instance, by right, any project, construction project, I mean, should have one dedicated scheduler or planner. What happened that at that particular project, they only have an engineer. Engineer have to take care of everything. Sometimes he had to take care of the workers. He had to take care of the quality. Quality is different issue. Safety is a totally different issue actually in terms of the field itself. People, you need to learn those specific field, and not to mention about scheduling. Scheduling also is a big field. You need to basically have a dedicated person that sit in front of the computer to update everything that being done, and then from that on, he can basically give all the right basically status. Then only you can take action. If, for instance, you want to depend on the same person again and again, so that person might not be able to cope with all kind of work pressure. Okay, so commitment is there. So you need to have a dedicated person. You need to hire people, spend the money that you basically get from the project in order to pay. And from the recorded by Bursa Malaysia, the public listed company have the responsibility to publish annual report. We have seen mostly construction contractor normally can make easily 10% of the net profit. We need to say they are making money. Maybe they put initially at 25%, 30%, but because of poorly managed project, at the end of the day, the profit is being reduced to 10%. 10% is a good amount. Just imagine if you get 1 billion ringgit a project, 10% will be 100 million. That is a lot of money. Failure to develop, implement, and sound strategy. So planning is basically is answering what we call 5W plus H. H is basically how. How are you going to achieve those things? Okay, you need to come up with all kind of action strategy in order to achieve what you basically plan. Lack of meaningful objective and goal. So the scope of work must be very clear. And then failure to see planning as rational process. A lot of time, planning is not realistic. Okay, we must come up with a realistic planning. And planning also not inclusive. There are missing things. The activity that's supposed to be there is not being put there, maybe by mistake, or people forget to see the scope of work. At the end of the day, when you forget to see the scope of work, you are going to left out. And maybe you ever wonder in the construction, in the real construction, sometimes people left out staircase. windows, door. It's very often. It is happening. It is a real thing. And not to mention planning. Planning is everything is on paper. Even the real thing also people could miss, not to mention the thing inside a piece of paper. Excessive reliance on experience. This is what I call complacent. As I mentioned, two project cannot duplicate itself. It's a unique. That is definition of project. Meaning to say, we can rely on experience most of the time, but the expectation is that we should expect the worst condition. Okay, there could be things unexpected coming. It is like COVID situation. Nobody expect the impact. Okay, people expect that we could run for a few months, but we never know. Maybe next year also, things do not fully settle. Okay, why people fail in lack of management support? Again, management want you to do your CPM using computer, for instance, but they do not want to send you for training. They do not want to purchase even software, a good computer. Okay, you if you use an old computer, maybe things could not be running smoothly. That is the issue. Lack of clear delegation. Why, on the first place, you develop WBS? As okay, we mentioned about WBS, work breakdown structure. Before that, later on, when you learn about organization, you are going to learn about OBS. OBS stands for Organizational Breakdown Structure. When you look at your organizational chart, so that organizational chart basically reflects this OBS. The WBS is almost the same kind of chart, but instead of putting people, okay, the CEO, the general manager, head of department, and all the subsequent people inside the organizational chart, we replace that with work. First thing first, what we are going to do. In construction, for instance, we are going to put example, the site preparation, the groundwork. Site preparation, there are many sub-activities. Then we move on into substructure works, meaning to say work below ground, such as piling, such as basement, if there are basements, such as ground beam, etc., etc. Then superstructure. Superstructure is anything above ground. What else? What we call columns, wall, beam, etc., until the end, the one that you can see the building there. And then external work. External work is basically the work outside of the building that could comprise of what we call landscaping, parking, road, drainage, fences, etc., etc. That is an example of WBS. Why you develop WBS? You develop WBS because there are a lot of work to be done, so that you have to categorize, and then later on you are going to attach OBS. OBS meaning to say people, so that you can delegate the work. Who is the PIC? Person in charge. Okay, so that later on, when the KPI basically not in accordance to what you want, you can basically get the person in charge to answer, or basically get the team to basically react. Okay, that is the issue with delegation. Lack of adequate control technique. Okay, quality control do have techniques. Safety control also do have techniques. Everything basically do have technique in order for us to rectify. So those kind of things have to be learned, and then later on you can catch up. Okay, so people are aware of the project might be running late, but they do not know what kind of strategy, for instance, because they do not want to learn the strategy, etc., etc. Resistant to change. This is the what we call behavioral or cultural issue. Okay, for instance, let's say our project is running late. Maybe due to COVID, easy. easy example. We have a lot of construction project cannot operate during the last 4 months, completely stopped, for instance. Now you continue your work. Okay, you continue your work, and there are a lot of catching up to do. Okay, you can basically be granted extension of time. Okay, that would be fine. But again, if you just simply follow the extension of time, then you might lose the opportunity. New project might not be coming, or you cannot take a new project because you still have the existing project. So you want to speed up. When you want to speed up, this is the issue. You need everybody to work extra hard, longer period of time, work on shift with the lack of people in the construction industry or in all industry, because we chase out all the foreign workers out of the country. Now we are running out of people. That is the issue. We need to increase the productivity, and that is not going to be easy. How basically you are going to motivate people to work basically extra hard. A lot of people do not like to do that because they might be comfortable with what they are doing right now. Okay, planning. Planning determines what must be done. How is it going to be performed? What sequential order, and then who will perform? Okay, so planning involves what we call thinking. There are maybe 5 or more W's and then H. H is basically how. How is there? What, when, no, when is, we reserve the when, where, who is going to get involved, which equipment you are going to do. So planning involves thinking process. Okay, the more you basically ask what, which, where, etc., you will answer a lot of questions. So that is what planning is all about. And you must basically come up with how it's going to be conducted. In construction, for instance, how normally related to construction method, okay, how we are going to execute. Planning require ability to visualize. This is what I mentioned to you. The ability to understand how construction is going to be executed from the ground level until you can see the building right now. If you look at the tall building, let's say Menara Warisan, after it completed, without knowing how it was constructed, there are videos that people share in the YouTube. If you look at the way they are constructed, you could be amazed at the engineer. Okay, how basically how difficult it is to even install things on higher ground there. It require all kind of precision, etc., etc. So on the experience, and that tall building looks like the people behind the tall building construction anywhere in the world, basically Mak Saleh lah, orang putih. Orang putih memang, because they have been constructing all kind of tall building in their country. So basically for them, it would be peanut. Intimate knowledge of construction method. So that's why during construction, as a contractor, you are being required to submit construction method. So what is it inside the construction method? Construction method is basically telling us the step-by-step procedure in order to construct something. When you can come up with a construction method, meaning to say you basically know how to constructing, you take into account of many things. So planning basically very much related to this concept. Okay, except that planning you put those things in a graphic form, whereas construction method you might basically come up with some kind of description, with some kind of figure or picture in order to show people step by step, so that at the end of the day people understand. And from your construction method will derive all kind of manpower, machinery, and then the material that you plan to basically utilize. Establishing interdependent. Interdependent is basically the logical relationship between one what we call one activity and another. Maybe you have you have heard about predecessor. Let's say activity A. We do have in a different slide later on, B and then C. So the concept of predecessor, then there is another concept of successor. That is the terminology used in order to show interdependence between activities or the logic relationship. Logic relationship. Example, piling. Then stump. Stump is something that you build on top of the piling head. Okay, after you drive your pile and then you cut off the head of the pile and then you would basically put. So normally it's like this. So your piling could be here, could be many piling or single piling. Then basically you group those things with what we call stump. Okay, a big piece of concrete in order to glue those piling together. Okay, and then subsequently you might erect what we call this beam or even column on top of those things. That would be the sequence A and then B. You cannot basically come up with the beam or column without this thing first, then second thing, and then the third things. That is what basically sequence. So in planning, for instance, once you have those things, the way we basically come up with, okay, this is activity. Oh, sorry. Sometimes the pen is okay. Now let me erase this thing. Okay, let's say activity. Activity is activity predecessor. Okay, activity A. Oh, activity A, B, C. So what is the predecessor of activity A? It's basically none, because before activity A, there is nothing. If there is nothing from this diagram, just an example. What is predecessor of activity B? Is activity A. So you write A, and then what is predecessor of activity C is basically B. So from this relationship that you draw in, then people basically will understand, okay, this is the sequence of activity. So the terminology used is basically predecessor, or we can use successor, the concept of successor. What is successor of A? Meaning the successor of A is what are the things that come after A. Predecessor is the concept, what comes before A, okay? So the predecessor of A is basically B. The predecessor of B is basically C, and the predecessor of C is none. Meaning to say that there is no more activity after C, and there is no more activity before A. The example from this diagram. So from that kind of what we call information, then you can basically develop your network diagram in order to show on a piece of paper how your activity are interconnected. But those kind of things, you are the one that need to develop. Because if you are very well experienced engineer or planner at the construction activity, then it will be very helpful for you to come up with this thing. The young people might not get the idea yet because they have no experience in the industry yet. Okay, there is one saying here by Eisenhower. Eisenhower is the I think American president long time ago, one of the American president. He said, plans are nothing, planning is everything. Plans are nothing, planning is everything. What does this thing mean? Okay, plan. You can develop a plan because planning involves thinking process. Sometimes you do planning on your head. Okay, on your head. To a certain extent, in a real work environment, you would put onto a piece of paper or onto a computer so that you can see your planning. Okay, so planning, even though it is planning involve a lot of detailing, on the experienced people can do a very good planning, but that is not the hardest part. The hardest part is basically implementing. When after you develop the planning, then only come the time, if for instance you get a project, then these are the real things, because whatever thing that you planned before just on piece of paper, now is the real situation where you need to really implement a real situation. And during implementation, you are going to face many challenges. Challenges in terms of things might not be in accordance to what you plan. This is what we call, in planning, we call it deviation. Deviation or variation, something that deviate from the actual plan. So that is what we call deviation. So what you need to do, if you detect deviation through the monitoring process or tracking process, then you need to, you can basically assess the impact, to what extent. If it is almost negligible, too small, you don't have to basically react very quickly, but you can still keep monitoring, because whatever the impact, it could grow into bigger and bigger and bigger. It is like the COVID situation. Let's say everybody get the vaccinated, except the anti-vaccine anyway. But then for sure, we cannot feel comfortable. We need to monitor the situation. We never know. This is the same thing with regard to planning, assess the impact. And if the impact is very big, we need to really make corrective action. Make corrective action. And you need to basically come up with the revised plan and then implement again, and then do tracking again. You never know, because the dynamic of during the implementation, that is the most challenging things. So this saying simply mentioned that, yeah, anybody can do planning. Let's say you start thinking, maybe you didn't have a chance to balik kampung or whatever after they announced the cross border, whatever, because once they announce, then you get stuck with this class. This weekend, next weekend, the following weekend, every weekend you will have classes after class. So maybe there is one weekend without the class, then you start thinking, okay, during the weekend, I want to go back to kampung. That is what we call planning. Okay, planning, maybe planning after 1 month, 2 months, thinking and thinking. Okay, then it will not be happening yet. Only when the date arrive, then this is what we call implementation stage. Only then all the challenges you will be materialized. And regardless of how difficult, okay, regardless of how difficult, we must go through the situation. And your ability to basically adjust yourself in order to fulfill the target. At the end of the day, you achieve what you have dreamed of or planned. That is what is the most important. So that's why sometimes people develop the project plan, okay, nice on paper, but you know what? Along the line, they basically abandon the things that they basically put in the computer because it was too difficult to update. They also do not know, because, and the worst situation is that they are not the one that developed the plan anyway. Maybe the plan was being developed by some kind of consultant. They just simply pay a certain amount of money, and then that consultant basically developed the CPM diagram. And after he or she got the money, okay, sorry, bye-bye. This is what I developed, and now it left with you. So you just wonder sometimes when you go to the construction site, you can see poster of the Gantt chart everywhere on the cabin there. When you ask, this is the latest one? No, ini dulu punya. Sekarang kita tak pakai ni. Kita pakai Excel je, senang. There is nothing wrong using whatever method. The most important thing, you understand. Dia tak jadi masalah. Memang ada certain project basically use Excel. As long as you understand, it is okay. There's nothing wrong, except that some client do insist on using all kind of sophisticated software until you also do not know because they impose so. Key element in planning, generate WBS. The first thing first, normally we develop WBS in order to come up with the list of activity. Okay, that is the most important things. And then estimate duration when you estimate duration, eventually cost will basically will be there because you will attach the right resources. And then logic, okay, logic, the sequence relationship must be there, because otherwise your work will be very funny, because you can basically do have things that can be done concurrently. That will be fine, but you cannot basically do things illogic, okay, such as building the roof first instead of doing the piling. Oh, well, that is illogic. Draw graphic representation. Okay. Eventually, when you develop your scheduling, the ultimate motive is we are going to put that thing in a graphic form. We can come up with a so-called Gantt chart, and then AOA diagram, and then PDM diagram. All kind of this is what we call graphic representation. Whatever it is, the end result is the same, except that the way the graphic is being shown could have differences because the nature of that graphic only. Okay. Then what else? Okay, now we come to almost the end of the slide. Planning, as I mentioned, planning and scheduling. Planning and scheduling is always the two words being combined together. It is like monitoring and control. We cannot basically left out control. We just simply say monitoring. And similarly, monitoring without control, it simply cannot work. Okay, it cannot work because you cannot control things if you do not know the situation. You need to assess the current situation then only you can take action. Otherwise, you are going to waste your time, money, effort, and etc. So planning involve, remember I mentioned about W and H. All kind of W, maybe what, which, who, where, what else? Even what else are W? And then this is how. So whatever W that you can come out with, except one W. That W we reserve for scheduling. So scheduling is always associated is when, meaning to say this has something to do with the timing or the actual date. So that's why in Project Management Institute, they use the word schedule management instead of time management, because what we have seen on piece of paper is basically the timing of the activity. So the timing of the activity is basically when you put all kind of dates or how many, the start date and end date of activity. That is what we call scheduling. But before you come up with who is going to conduct, who is going to execute work, where is the location, that should be fine because that is part of the planning thinking process. But scheduling is the timing. And so the scheduling is one of the most important thing. It is when the actual work will basically take place, and then you will face all kind of difficulties during this time. Okay, but planning and scheduling is hand in hand. You cannot basically have scheduling without the planning. Step to effective project management: you need to examine the contract first, list all major contractual obligation, divide project into major. This is what we call WBS. Come up with the technology that you are going to use, because it will influence the sequence of work, and figure out about the productivity rate, duration of the course, calculate or basically come up with the initial schedule, and then revise schedule. Sometimes the schedule that you see in the final version, it basically have gone through many versions. Later on, when we learn about resource leveling and smoothing, later on you are going to see how come the resource leveling looks very nice. Well, because it has gone through many changes. The final version might not be the same as the initial version. Resource evaluation is an example of resource leveling and smoothing. Time cost trade-off. This is an example of project compression that I mentioned to you. Okay. Let's say the client want the contractor to compress the project instead of 2 years and 1.5 years. The question will arise, is the project cost going to be increased, or is it going to be reduced, or remain at the same level? That could be the situation. We wanted to know those things. We are going to learn in one of the class later on. Project cash flow. Project cash flow is basically has something to do with the S curve. Okay, S curve. How do people basically develop S curve? It basically comes from this concept. And this S curve will, at the end of the day, will reflect financial progress. We do have another one, we call it physical progress. That is one of the common indicator being used in the industry to reflect your current progress. Could be 10%, 20%. Sometimes it's very difficult to mention to people. It is better to put it in terms of some kind of graph. But if you tell people also, people who do not know the project, of course, they do not have any idea, except people who understand about the project, then they can imagine. Let's say you are building 10-story high of high-rise building. Let's say you mention, okay, our project now progress at 20%. Well, you can imagine 20%, maybe could be around, you have achieved maybe up to, I don't know, first story or second story. That kind of imagination, at least as a indicator. All right, include all important procurement. Okay, procurement meaning to say we secure material, machine, etc., etc. Okay, sometimes procurement is the issue. Nowadays, in the COVID situation, the material are not there because a lot of factory, either in Malaysia or overseas, cannot get the raw material because there are a lot of people who do not come to work because of the constraint SOP. So the material could be issued that will affect the real what we call execution of the project. Okay. All right. So that will be the end of the introduction, just introduction. And okay, let me stop the recording. Stop there.